In this video, you'll see me drawing or sketching and then painting some flowers from my garden. Here, you'll see with a simple colored pencil in terracotta color, I'm doing a quick drawing or a sketch on a toned canvas that's toned with white gesso with a little bit of yellow in it to warm it up. So here what I'm doing is I'm thinking about the major shapes of the drawing just to get the overall composition established. And then I start to add big blocks of color so that the painting can make sense in terms of the color families or the color groups. My goal is to get those colors in as quickly as possible, just to see what makes sense, and make sure that the selections that I've made for my palette are really working for the purpose of this painting. I'm also looking to make strong contrasts in this case because I did like the color of the flowers. I wanted to emphasize those colors as well as their contrasts across the painting. So I got those warm tones in very quickly with the red, the orange, and some yellow, which is really mixed in with the orange on the lit side of the flowers in the front. And then I moved into these purples. Now those purples are a lot stronger in paint than they are in reality. And that's because I know that I'm going to be adding a lot of white, which will make it look more like atmosphere or space. But I've learned from experience that if we put that strong color in first and then knock it down, it creates a little bit of a vibe where those paints show through from underneath. So it can create some of that flickering look I like to have in my paintings, or at least that blended look of the paint. So here, my next step is to make sure that the canvas is fully covered with paint, that it's nice and rich. And you see now that that purple doesn't look as strong. The more of the canvas that I get covered and the more white and gray that I mix in, the softer that background color looks. Here now, there's a lot of warmth and orange on the table that's showing up with the yellow of the light. So that's going to reflect through the glass and even have some of that transferred light showing up in the middle of the shadows there from the shadow of the glass. You may notice that the shadows on the flowers are largely green and the lit side is orange and yellow and pink. Now that I've got those darkest darks and the main colors established, I'm just picking the areas where I'm going to be putting the highlights later. That helps me to establish the major shapes on the glass because glass is so transparent. And it helps me make sure that the composition is going to make sense when everything else is done. So I'll come back to those highlights later and restate them. Really, I'm putting them here as notes, more like references. The flowers that you see are Ranunculus from a plant that was growing in my garden. And this was Mother's Day, so they were really at the end. And they had started to open up. They're usually very much a cup shape, but they had started to open up where some of the petals were about to start falling off. So there were lots of crispy edges to capture. And the heart of the flower in the middle was really red when I was working on the painting, and I had to decide how deep and strong I wanted to make that color in the cup of the flower. In terms of the composition, one of the things I was looking for here was to create this sense of calmness or peace and balance in a beautiful and hectic and busy world. So those are some of the concepts that I'm thinking about as I'm deciding how rich to make color or how soft to make transitions, or maybe even how sharp to make certain edges or how soft those edges would be. So I'm making a lot of decisions at once during these explorations, and because this was a fun Mother's Day activity for me to do, just kind of enjoying time in my studio, there's a lot of exploration going on in this painting. You'll see that where the lits are going on that middle flower, I'm adding lots of yellow and pulling them out and deciding what I think. And then on that flower on the right, red tends to draw the eye in, so I knew I had a challenge to deal with there. How much of that red and purple should I put in versus keeping it soft? without drawing the eye, but capturing some of that beautiful color. So one of the ways I reconciled that was to limit my color selections to only quinacridone magenta and cad red bright on that flower. I might have added more color if I wanted to draw more attention, but I did allow myself to use some white where I needed to establish more of the lit area, because the white naturally reduces the intensity of red. And then, of course, I created a little blur around the flower to show some of the light bouncing off of that side. Now, as I progress, it's tempting to just continue to work on these beautiful flowers because they are the subject of the painting. But everything in the painting relates to everything else. So, as I work on the flowers, you'll notice that I jump back and forth between the main subject and other areas, the table, the petals that have fallen onto the table, even the light that's transferred through the glass or reflections on the glass. And then, of course, the atmosphere, what we see around the flowers and in the distance in the room behind the table there. Although it was a simple flat wall, there were some interesting light shifts that can help to back up the flowers and create just a little bit of contrast. On the shade side of the flowers, my mind is going back and forth between, is it green, is it red, is it yellow or orange? And I'm putting in different colors based on what I see to continue exploring that. And then I noticed that I really did need to bring the color of the space or the atmosphere closer to reality so that I could understand those shadows better. So you notice that I moved away from the shadows and then came back to them again. While progressing on the painting, now it's time for me to look for those areas of interest or things that are different. So with mechanical things, we tend to look for balance or what is the same. For example, two sides of a glass being the same because they're mechanical. But with nature, we want to look for some of those natural differences and highlight them. So as I move between the different objects, I'm shifting my mindset and asking, am I looking for things that are the same, or I'm looking for things that are different? And then, of course, I'm also exploring things that maybe break the laws of physics. So if there's light bouncing around the back side of the glass, I can't have a full shadow going to the edge of the table. So you'll see that I work on that shadow area as well to make sure that it makes sense and that it looks honest and true throughout the painting. So right about here, you'll start to see that I've got that sense of balance that I'm looking for. The composition is centered. It's intended to be peaceful. It's intended to be happy and colorful, to reflect the way that I was feeling on Mother's Day, having this quiet time and all that wonderful support of a family. But at the same time, I wanted to capture that excitement, that kind of happiness of the natural world. So as I was working out these highlights, I realized there were some elements that I wanted to add up above to keep some action in the upper part of the painting. So you'll start to see, as I move it with a smaller brush, I'll start to put in some dots and dashes that move along the edges of the flowers as if they're sparkling in a way, or their color is sparkling off. And now I'm just going to add some pinks and some bright colors into those shadows and areas of the flowers so that there's some intense interest in there. And it flickers in the same way that when the eye looks at a shadow, we're sort of trying to make out all of the wonderful things that are going on inside. There's so many things about a painting that I feel represent real life and the complexity and symbolize that. This is one of those examples where the painting may look very simple, but also have just a dash of meaning about life in it. I hope you enjoyed it.